G'day, it's Rusty. Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be making ourselves a sheet metal bender. Some people call them sheet metal brake. And the idea of it is we want to be able to make it so I can bolt it to my welding bench. And we also want to be able to make it so I can take it off the bench and put it on a stand if we want to use it outside, because this bench being on wheels, we're not going to take it out in the gravel. But we might want to move it to a different location. So with that in mind, I'll just run through and show you the pieces that we're going to use to make this sheet metal bender. Now there's four main pieces to this bender, and the materials I'm using are materials I've already got in the shop. So I had to buy a few things, but the steel that I had, I'm trying to use it. So you might think, oh, I would have used something different, and I'm sure there's lots of different ways of making these. This is certainly not my own design. I've seen others make something similar. But I'll just explain what we're doing is, this is a piece of 75 by 40 C-channel, and this is going to be the crux of it in terms of where the bending action will happen from. So to make this fit the bench, I've got a piece of 70 by 10 flat bar, and I'm going to drill 5 holes through this along this length, and then we're going to weld these nuts on the inside of this plate, and we're then going to weld, let me put this down without making a noise, and then we're going to weld the C-channel onto that plate, and then I'm going to have mounting holes drilled in the bench using these as a template, and then I can use these sections of threaded rod with a nut on them, and this will be my stud that I'll bolt in underneath. Now the second part is the hinged piece. Now this is a piece of 50 by 50 by 5 angle iron, and it will fit, it'll sit on some hinges, if I can do this properly. So it'll be hinged onto here, and it's the bit that's going to bend up and down and give me my bend. And sitting on top of this will be another piece of 50 by 50 by 5 angle iron sitting basically on a flat there, and this is the clamping bar. Now the clamping bar will be held in place by some 50 by 50 by 5 angle, which will be welded to the end. Again, there'll be a hole in this end with a stud going through it and on either end. And then for a tensioner, I'm using a threaded section with a piece of tube, and I've got some 12mm rod that I'll bend to shape, and that'll be the tensioning piece for this, which we can adjust on this nut to move it up and down to make sure that piece sits nice and flat and gives us a nice firm hold on the sheet metal that's in here. And so that's the main 4 bits. What I'll show you now is the way I'm going to hinge this together, and I'll just bring the camera around and show you. The hinge component of the bender are these 2 bushes, and what I'll do is, these are 24mm diameter, so what I'll do is I'll cut 12mm out of the top and the side, so they need to be recessed into that piece of C-channel. And they also need to be, let me use a smaller bit, I'll use a smaller bit just to show you. So basically that needs to be cut out as well. So these 2 will fit, so the hinge part is as center line of the pin, which I need to, I've got some 16mm round bar to make a pin, and I just need to machine that down the lathe. So the hinge section will be cut into there and notched out of the angle iron. So that's probably the first thing we'll do, and to make this hinge assembly, and I'll get to and I'll mark this out and I'll cut it out and I'll show you how it's going to look. Right, I've got to make these hinge pins, and I've got some 16mm round bar, and I'm just going to machine it down. The internal dimension of that bush is 14.3, so I've just got to machine it down, and I'll get started on that now. Alright, so that's the first pin. That'll just slide on there nice, and that's the other half. So those two bushes together. I should have said before, one side gets welded to the main C channel and the other side gets welded to the angle iron piece that's the folding piece. So that's one pin. I'll get on and make the other one now. And these are the pins I've made up for these hinge bushes. So that pin goes in there, and this pin, it's a nice fit in there. I've just left a little head on it, so if I needed to get it out for some reason, I can probably pull it out. Alright, so next thing is to cut the C-section and the piece of angle iron that's going to be the bending piece to accommodate these. What I was saying before was the center of the pin there, which is the 12mm I mentioned, that's the center of the pin needs to be on the center line of the two faces that one's fixed, one bends, and need to keep it as tight as I can. So that's the reason for cutting the 12mm out either side, because it's half this 24mm. So I'll get on and do that now. Alright, so that's one cut out. So I'll just grab the pin. As you can see, that'll sit in there, and then I've got to do the same to the angle iron as well. So I'll just clean this up and I'll finish this one, and I'll do the angle iron. I'll show you how it all goes together. Now the next thing we need to do is take this piece of 75x10 flat bar, and I've already marked and center punched the holes where basically the mounting nuts are going to go through. Like I'm going to weld a nut on there. So we've got to take that over the drill press and drill these. And what I need to do first is drill each of these 5 holes, like with a 3mm or 1/8" pilot hole, and then come back and use this as a template and clamp it to my bench and use them as a pilot to drill the holes through my bench. Once I've got those, then we can make those holes bigger to suit those 3/4 studs that I'm going to use. So now that we've drilled the pilot hole in this 75x10mm plate, I said we're going to mount. I've just clamped it onto my bench, which is my welding bench. I'm using these holes as pilot holes so I get it in exactly the right spot, and we'll go ahead and do that now. Might pay to take the drill off hammer drill. That's not the way you should be doing it. Alright, try again. Take 2. Alright, so now we've drilled those 5 holes into the bench using the plate as a pilot. We'll take the 75x10 back to the drill press and drill the hole big enough. Oi! So Roy's having a crack. We're going to drill the hole to suit that that 3/4 Whitworth threaded rod we're using. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the hole big enough to recess the nut, machine a little collar on it, so it'll rest inside the hole. So we're going to put a 28mm hole in there, and we'll go back on the drill press now. And now we're going to drill the holes in the bench, and we're going to use a 20mm hole saw for those, so I'll get onto that now. Right, that's the first one. Got 4 to go. Let me test this thread, see how that looks. Here's one of them. Oh yeah, nice. That's a good clearance hole. Alright, got 4 to go. And here's what the edge of my bench looks like. I've drilled those 5 20mm holes with a hole saw. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they line up with that piece of 75 by 10 flat bar, which has got those nuts that I've countersunk in, and that'll be the basis for how the whole thing clamps onto the bench. Well, now we've drilled these 28mm holes in this plate. What I'm going to do now is take these 3/4 nuts and just machine a shoulder on them so it'll actually recess inside there, and that'll centralise that for me, so remembering that the C-channel is going to be welded on top of this, so I'm never going to get to this again, and I don't want the stud to bind in the knee. So alright, we'll go over the lathe and we'll machine a shoulder on them. It'll only be 5mm down here, and we'll machine it down to fit that little recess there. Now we're going to machine these 5 nuts down, put that little shoulder on them so they fit in that 28mm hole on the 75 by 10 flat bar. Alright, let's go and try it on the plate. And here is that nut that we've just machined the little shoulder on, and I just try it in that hole. Ah, beautiful. Okay, so we've got 4 more to go. Yeah, I like that. That'll make sure that the bolt coming through underneath is actually seated square and it's not going to bind underneath. Cool. Alright, 4 to go. And here is that piece of 75 by 10 flat bar with the nuts recessed in it. Another one there. One there. One there. And yeah, this one on the end. So they're machined and ready to go. I need to just weld those in place. And this is the arrangement now with the plate clamped onto, I'll show you here, plates clamped onto the bench with those recessed nuts, and there's 5 of those. Hope you can see that. Sun's shining, glaring in my face. So that's them there. Now the next job will be to run a weld around these to weld these nuts in place, and then we'll start assembling it. We'll put the C-channel on top, we'll put the hinges in, we'll put the piece that bends, whatever you call that bit, the bendy bit, and then we'll assemble the top piece and sort of assemble it now it's on the bench here. So that's how it looks, and we'll get on and weld those nuts in. Now I'm using my Unimig Razor 200, which is an AC/DC TIG welder, and it's just running the pure argon bottle. Really nice welder, easy to use, and being AC and DC, I can weld aluminium if I need to. Now I've welded these nuts in. I've just welded every second flat. I didn't think it was necessary to weld every flat on these nuts. I said there's 5 holding it down onto the bench, and I do only need to clamp it to the bench. I don't need to, you know, clamp it down with enough force to strip the bolts, and they are 3/4 bolts, so I'm certain that that's enough weld on the nuts to hold them all in place. Alright, now we're going to weld this C-channel onto this 75 by 10 flat bar. I've just put a slight V in both edges on both sides, so I'm going to run some stitch welds all the way down on both sides. So alright, I'll get on and do that now. Now that I've welded the 75 by 10 to this C-channel, I've now put this angle iron piece, which is the folding piece, and I've aligned it. I've clamped these two together, and I've got the faces level all the way down here. Now I've got the pin in place, the hinge pin in place, and what I need to do now is work out which side I want to weld to the fixture and which side of the pin I want to weld to the folding plate. And I think I'm going to weld the folding plate to the outside pin, because if for any reason I want to change this, it'd be easier to replace this and resize this, leaving this one in place. And the same on this side, I'm going to do the same. So I'll weld this hinge piece onto the fixture, and the outside piece can be on the folding piece. So alright, I'll go ahead and just tack weld them first, try it, make sure it works, and then I'll be able to weld them properly. Alright, now that we've welded the hinge pins, the hinge bushes on, I can now turn this. Quite happy with that. We now need to turn our attention to this top piece, and this is the clamping bar, and this is also made out of 50/50 by 5 angle, and that fits on there. And to hold it down, what I've got is a piece of angle. I've drilled a hole in it to suit this 3/4 threaded rod that I'm using. I've welded a nut on the bottom, so that's going to be my hold down with a nut on top. Now this fits this plate up against the edge of this angle, and the same on the other side. And this is my tensioner. It'll fit on here. Well, I've got some 12mm rod going from across the top down to each corner of this, where the clamping plate meets this fixture. And what I've also got is I've made these stops, and the idea of the stop is I need to be able to move this top bar, this clamping bar, back a bit, because I need to have clearance between the edge, let me move this, between the edge of here and when you turn it, the thickness of the metal has to be compensated for. So I've got to be able to move this bar back by the thickness of the plate or the metal, the sheet metal that I'm bending. So what I need to do is two things. This hole needs to be slightly elongated so this whole thing can move back a bit. And the other thing I'm doing too is this stop needs to be welded on here, and then I can adjust the thread on this bolt to actually give me a stopper, so it pushes back against it. I lock it down, and then when I bend this bending plate up, this is not going to sort of try and push backwards. It's actually going to be held against these two stoppers. So the next thing to do is to weld this in place. I've just got to slot this hole and then weld these stoppers here, and then I can go ahead and do this top bar, and I'll put that 12mm round bar as my tensioner, which will be welded to the top of this, and I've got to weld that on. So I'll get on and weld all this, and I'll show you how it looks when I finished it, and then we should be, fingers crossed, very close to be able to putting something in and actually trying it. Still got to put handles on here, of course, and that's sort of to do after I've finished this top clamping bar. Alright, well, I finished the clamping bar. I'll just show you how that looks now. So we've got a nut and a washer, nut and a washer. That's the bar. So the idea is this brace is just to give it some strength. You'll see I've got a spring on here which just helps lift this bar up when you want to clamp it down. These are the stopping plates I mentioned before, and the idea is to stop this whole bar moving backwards. And what else? I've welded handles onto my hinge piece. So that's a piece of 25 by 25 square tubing. But I'm about to put a piece in. Let's show you what that looks like. So I've got a piece of, this is about 90 thou galvanised sheeting, and I'm just going to slide that in there, and just let me do this up. So these back stops here just stop that whole thing moving backwards. So right, that's clamped in there. And there we go. Now I can go over 90, and I recess this top mounting plate back a little bit. I put a little cut back in, take that off, so it does allow this, because when you're bending sheet you might go a little bit 90 when it springs back. So alright, let's just take that out and have a look at it. This is going to be the awkward bit. I'm going to have to do something about these nuts. I don't want to have to keep using a spanner all the time, but maybe a T-handle or something on it. That just sprung back up. So that's not a bad little bend there. I don't know whether the camera, hope the camera can see that. Right, now I've got a piece of 1.6mm mild steel. Probably not going to be bending anything this big, but I just want to give it a try. Okay, so let me just line that up in there. All right. Let's see how we go bending this. Oh, okay. Don't know whether you saw that. I'll just bring the camera in a bit closer and show you what it did. All right, as I was bending this folding piece actually started to push away. I don't know whether you can see that. Yeah, this is starting to push away on the hinge, so the metal is actually allowing this to flex. Yeah, I guess that's going to impact on the bend. So I think what we might have to do with this is put one of these braces on here to try and push that middle back in. So I'll just take this out and show you. Okay, that's 1.6mm, and I think the bend is not as tight as it could be. and that's going to be because this edge of the angle is actually rounded. I'll probably need to machine that down and get it nice and level to give me a sharper point. But the other issue was this bending away. Yeah, so two things. The bend on this is not as tight as it could be, and that's probably because the angle iron edge is rounded. So I'm probably going to need to grind that flat to give me more of a hard point rather than like a round edge. And the other thing was, I'll just take this off and I'll just show you what I mean. Down there. When I bent this up, this started to flex back a little bit. So it's obviously flexing on the hinge coming back against the metal. And I think the way to fix that would be to put a similar but a smaller brace on here, and probably some sort of gusset through here, only a small one. So I'll put that in now and I'll just try it, because I have a job for this. I'm going to be bending some wide sheet, but it's only the thin stuff, but I want to get it right. So let me put that gusset in here and we'll see if we can just stop that flexing a little bit. Okay, so what I've got here is, this is going to be my brace. I'm just using some 8mm round bar. I've got a bolt here and I've cut the head off and cut it at a V so it'll fit inside this angle, and it's got an adjusting nut, and then I'll weld that on there, and then each end of this comes down inside and I'll just line that up, and I'll make it so it's actually standing up sort of in the middle of the angle. That'll clear the handles. So I'll get on and weld that into place and we'll see how that works. Alright, so I've welded that in place and I've welded the ends. So if I need to adjust this now, all I need to do is put a little bit of load on that nut under there to give that little bit of strength. Alright, let's put it back in together and see how it looks when we try and bend that 1.6mm mild steel plate. Alright, so now that we've put that brace on the folding piece, I've clamped this 1.6mm mild steel sheet into the bender again, and we're going to give it another go and we'll just see if that stops that flexing here. Alright, here goes. Oh, that's better. It is flexing a little bit, but I don't... Well, there's a trap for young players. We're just catching that a bit. Okay. It is flexing a little bit, but it's not as much. So that's a good thing. Alright, I'm happy with that. Just noticed that that lower bit did catch the sheet if you had two folds in it. We might have to look at that again, but for what I'm trying to do, I'm not really trying to put lots of folds in, so I think we might be okay with that. Just looking at that second bend, it does look a bit tighter than this one. This one is a bit more rounded, and that was because this the bending plate was actually flexing away a bit, but now we've got that in its... Now we've got this brace, it didn't flex as much, so ultimately cleaning up this edge in here would give it a bit of a sharper bend. So I've ground this edge, and I've also just taken a little piece off the top. So that top edge now gives me a nice square edge there, all the way down. Hope that's focused. Yeah, all the way down that edge now. So let's take that back over and see if we get a little tighter bend. All right, now that I've ground this front edge a bit, I'm just going to see what the bend looks like now. So we'll have another go at this 1.6mm mild steel plate, and it's up this end, so this should keep it nice and rigid. We'll just see what the bend looks like. So that's the bend with the edge cleaned up a little bit. I've gone a little bit past the 90 when I bent it, but yeah, it's a little bit better. Probably needs to be a little bit more work on that leading edge on the clamping bar. Now, after initially using a piece of angle iron here for the bending bar, I found that it was flexing. So what I've done is I've boxed it in now, and I've used a piece of 50 by 50 by 5 angle, and I've boxed this whole section in, and where the handles come up I just cut it out around here, and then I put the brace back on. And the reason the brace is back here is to push this edge, which is the bending edge, if I can put it in there. That's the bending edge. So if it was actually pushing this way, the bending edge was pushing this way. So with this brace back in place, the idea is to stop that. So I am getting better bends now, and I think that that was the way to go, to box this in to make it stronger. So I'll just show you what a bend looks like. Right, so I've got a piece of 3mm aluminium, and I'm just going to put it in here and give it a bend, and I'll just show you how that looks. Alright, so I've got it clamped down here. I've moved the clamping bar back so it's up against the stop, so I've got 3mm of gap between the leading edge and the edge of this clamp bar, so I've got room for the metal. So when I bend this, that's about, guessing that at 90, yeah, that bend doesn't flex out anymore, so that's a good thing. I'll just pull it out and I'll show you. There's that bend, but it is quite a nice sharp bend, and I think that's because I've cleaned this edge up underneath and because I've strengthened this. So yeah, really pleased with that bend now. So the bend is now complete. It's had a coat of paint and it's ready for me to put it into service. I've got some thin sheet gauge metal I've got to bend, so that'll be the first job for it. Now, I forgot to mention in the beginning, my bench is 1600 wide. That's why this whole bender assembly is 1600. The actual clamping bar is 1360 wide, so I've got some thin galvanized sheet to bend, and it's 1200 wide, so I'm easily going to get it in here. Strengthening this folding bar by putting the other piece of angle line and boxing it in, and putting this brace on the back has really stiffened it up, so it's lost that flex. So I really needed to do that in order to give it the rigidity that it needed. So that's it for this video. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of maybe some ideas to build your own. Maybe it doesn't have to be this big, but you might want to build a smaller one. But you know, as I said, the idea isn't strictly mine. I have seen others online. So yeah, so that's the bender completed. And if you like the video, a thumbs up would be appreciated. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, the subscribe button is down here. And if you have any questions or queries about the build, please put them in the comments below. I'll certainly answer all your questions. One thing, if you do give it a thumbs down and there's something you don't like about the video, I'd appreciate it if you did write what it was that you didn't like, because I'm always trying to sort of make better content for my videos. So yep, this is going to get a bit of work shortly, so I'm really looking forward to getting in and using it. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.